Okay, welcome to the recording for Chapter 10. These are basically the other qualified-like plans. Well, we'll draw some distinction when we get to 457 plans, because some of those are qualified-like and some of those are not qualified-like. So we have, again, going back to the first day of class, we drew the big chart on the board where we talked about the qualified plans and the qualified-like plans. So the qualified-like plans were plans that did not fall under ERISA, but they had lots of the same rules. They were the money belonged to the employees. You may not have to file a Form 5500 and do ADP testing. Some of the plans you do, as we talked about when we got to the when we did the SARSEPs. However, there were the big employer plans and the small employer plans. So the small employers were the SEPs, which we talked about in Chapter 9. The simple is also another small employer plan, and the big employer plans are the 403Bs and the government 457Bs. So but there are other types of 457s, which we'll also cover in this chapter. Okay. Let me escape. I want to make sure that we're capturing this. I see that I can see now that I hope that you guys are seeing the screen. Okay. Simple, you won't be tested on this, stands for Savings Incentive Match Plan for Employees. This is the qualified-like plan, which is similar. It's not a mirror image, but it's fairly similar to the 401k, but doesn't require a lot of the testing when we're talking about simple IRAs. So for employers, it's basically a COTA plan. Easy to establish, easy to maintain. You don't have to write a big plan document like you do with 401k plans. Similar tax advantages to the 401k. Employee elective deferrals with some employer contributions, either match or non-elective, which we'll get into. There are two types of simples, the simple IRAs, which you see, the simple 401ks, which you don't see. The reason that you don't see the simple 401ks is because they require the same sort of testing. They have the limitations of the simple in terms of the contributions and the lack of the ability to customize and skew, but you have to do the same sort of reporting on an annual basis and testing that you do in a traditional 401k. So I've never seen a simple 401k, simple IRA, but we're still going to go over the rules of them. Again, you use 5304, 5305 is what you used with the SEP. I'm not going to test you on that. So you do have to provide participants with a 60-day period for elective deferral. You cannot have a qualified plan. So if the employer has a DB plan or a profit sharing plan, you're not going to be able to do a simple. And like the SEP, the participant is 100% vested in all contributions to the simple, both employee and employer. So, unlike the SEP, we have the SARSEP was limited to 25 eligible employees. This one is limited to 100. Lots of people think you can't do it with 100. Actually, you can do it with 100. You can't do it with 101. The maximum number is 100. And the test, you don't have the 3 of the 5 year test. You have the $5,000. The SEP has 3 of 5 years and $550. Higher earnings limit, so I may be able to exclude some really part-time employees, but anybody that makes over $5,000 in the preceding calendar year, I'm going to have to include them this year in the simple plan. So you got different contribution limits and catch-up limits. 12,000 instead of 17,500 versus the 401k. 2,500 instead of 5,500 for catch-up. So the maximum is 14,500. Again, 50 and older is the catch-up deal. Employer contributions you can either do a match up to 3% or a non-elective contribution up to 2%. Fairly similar to a safe harbor 401k. So that, but the safe harbor 401k actually is 100% of the first 3% and then 50% of the next 2%. But this is pretty simple. So contributions to the simple are tax deductible. We don't have a Roth feature. They have tax-free growth, and so unlike the SEP, the contributions must be made by the due date, including extensions, but the establishment is different. It is different. It has to be done earlier. So the employee deferral contributions, like other COTAs, are subject to payroll tax. Employer contributions, like other qualified plans and like the SEP, are not subject to payroll tax. So withdrawals, like other qualified and qualified-like plans, tax as ordinary income, can be rolled over into a regular IRA or another qualified plan. So again, very qualified-like in that manner. Here's one of the exceptions: early withdrawal penalties. 10% usually, but it's 25% if the employee is completed within the first 2 years if the early withdrawal is within the first 2 years of the employee's participation in the plan. You can expect to be tested on the differences on the CFP board examination, and this is certainly fair game on my exam. This is the one that's different. Not just a 10% penalty, a 25% penalty within the first 2 years. And then we're subject to the IRA early withdrawal exclusions. Not to the qualified plan, but the IRA. So you don't get 55 in separation from service. So make those connections from the prior chapters. So simple 401k plans. Not going to kind of gloss over this quickly. They can have loans. I've never seen a simple 401k, so I don't know nobody that I know has ever seen a simple 401k. But there can be plan loans. You can't have that in simple IRA. Very few of them are established. So here's a good chart. Anytime you see charts like this, you should spend some time studying it. It's the simple IRA only. It's the simple IRA that's limited to 100. So is the simple 401k. 401k plans can be a lot more. The style, it's mostly elective deferral. The employer matching is the employer contributions are similar to a safe harbor 401k plan. The establishment date is October 1st. This is because this is a deferral plan. 401k plans, you want to establish those as early in the year as possible. The deadline for a safe harbor 401k is still October 1st as well. So this 12/31 is not exactly right. Just in 401k plans, you want to establish them as early in the year as possible. It's a good thing that you'll be planning now for starting a 401k plan for next year. You can still do October 1st in a simple, because it doesn't make sense to start a simple that's based upon it's a COTA plan where the employee is the primary person doing it and they have to defer salary into it, so it doesn't make sense to start it so late in the year that employees are hardly going to be able to do it. Vesting. All contributions are fully vested, employer and employee. Vesting schedules are allowed only on employer contributions in non-safe harbor 401k plans. Still, employee money is always employee money. here's the deal, this annual testing. Here's the reason why you don't see these simple 401ks. Is that you get this, the filing costs. Filing and costs is the same as the 401k. You got to do annual filing. No annual filing in the simple IRA. You do have to do annual filing in the 401k. So this is why you're not going to see that. So why would I take that when I can only do 14,000 and I got to jump and I can't exclude people that make less than $5,000, stuff like that. So here's the contributions: 12,000, 2,500 employer contributions. The simple 401k has this rule where we can go 3%, but we can go as low as 1% in 2 out of 5 years. I'm not likely to test you on that. In-service withdrawals permitted. Here, simple IRA is not permitted. In-service withdrawals permitted, but there's a 10% penalty under 59.5, 25%. Here, this is only the simple IRA. Simple 401k is the same as the traditional 401k. Study this chart. Getting into 403B plans. Typically, 403B plans will be for public schools or educational institutions. There can be some other government entities, so they can have it. But as a William Patterson employee, I can participate in a 403B plan if I choose to do so. But typically, you'll see it in public high schools and elementary schools, tax-exempt organizations can have it as well, 501c3. So you'll often see tax-exempt hospitals will have the 403B plans. Again, 403B is the fraternal twin of the 401k. So the ERISA does not apply to governmental 403Bs, but it can apply to nonprofit 403Bs that are not church related, and it can also apply. Testing requirements can apply if the employer makes contributions. Most 403B plans, the employer does not make any contributions. So you got to do the ACP testing actually in the if the employer makes contributions. You got to offer pre-retirement joint and survivor annuity, qualified joint and survivor annuity options. It used to be 403Bs are known as tax-sheltered annuities. It used to be that the only kind of funding vehicle that you could have for these was an annuity contract, typically a variable annuity contract. That is no longer the case. We can still do, we're not going to do individual stocks and bonds, but we can still have mutual funds, which is what most 401ks are funded with. So eligibility, 21 and 1 year of service. The following are considered eligible employees, and you can read this stuff here: tax-exempt organizations, employees who are day-to-day operations, cooperative hospital service organizations, ministers, all this blah, blah, blah. So self-employed ministers, there are lots of ministers in smaller churches that basically are independent contractors. They receive a 1099. They would be considered self-employed. So they have to make their own reportings if they establish a 403B for themselves. Contributions are tax deductible. The limits are $17,500 and $5,500 for the catch-up, but we'll see that there's a special kind of catch-up for 403Bs, which we'll get here in a minute. Vesting, 100% vesting in all employee contributions. Employer contributions hardly ever happen, but they may or may not be subject to vesting, depending upon the plan document. Here's the special catch-up. If you have been working at the same place for 15 years, in addition to the $5,500, you can do $3,000. So let's say let's say Jake has been working at his employer, a public school, since the age of 33. Starting at age 48, Jake can contribute $17,500 plus $3,000. That's $20,500. Once he turns age 50, Jake can do $17,500 plus $3,000, $2,500. Plus he can do $20,500 plus $5,500 for a total of $26,000 in contributions. These catch-ups, in other words, are additive. You can add them together. We'll see that that is not the case with 457 special catch-up contributions. We'll get there in a few minutes. Investment choices, insurance annuity contracts, which are often, most of them are just invested in mutual funds, just like most 401ks are invested in mutual funds now. Loans from 403B plans are only permitted from ERISA plans, so non-church, non-government, and they would be subject to the same rules as 401k plans. So distributions, 59, death, separation from service, disability, hardship, same thing. Same thing as the 401k. And you'll just look at Chapter 7. Distributions are taxed as ordinary income subject to the 10% penalty. I'm going over this fairly quickly because there's not a lot of new information here. Subject to the same RMD rules as IRAs and qualified plans. The deferral contributions, taxation of deferral contributions are taxed at ordinary income. There can be after-tax contributions to a 403B. So I can do, if I do $17,500 here at William Patterson, I can do additional 403 contributions up to the $52,000 limit. If I'm not participating in other qualified or qualified-like plans similar to that, up to the full $52,000 total. 457 plans. So 457 plans are non-qualified. Now, there's a special type of 457 plan that is qualified-like, and this is only for government 457B plans that are eligible. And we'll get to that. There's a chart that we'll talk about here in a minute. So who can establish any high level any 457 plan? Again, non-qualified plans. If we think back to that chart that we drew on the board on the first day of class, non-qualified deferred compensation plans is the money. If the money is put in a trust, that means the money is effectively the employee's, then it has to be subject to substantial risk of forfeiture in order to receive any sort of tax qualified treatment. Otherwise, the employee will be taxed on the contribution that's made to that plan in that year. So And we'll get into more on that in Chapter 11 or Chapter 12. So who can establish any 457? Trade associations, religious organizations, excluding churches, private hospital, because they have their own special kinds of plans. Private hospitals, rural electric cooperatives, farmers cooperatives, private schools, labor unions, and charitable organizations, and also government entities. Eligible government entities: states, political subdivision of the state, and a state agency. William Patterson would be considered a state agency. So here are 457 plans. 457 plans are either eligible or ineligible. So 457B plans, and we're going to focus for qualified like purposes, we're going to focus on government 457B plans that are available to all eligible employees. These other kinds of plans typically are focused on highly compensated or management. We can be discriminatory. That's what makes them non-qualified. The one that makes this qualified like is that it can't be discriminatory, and the employee gets this money. It's effectively theirs. It's in a trust for them. It's not subject to substantial risk of forfeiture, but you do get the tax deferral status. This is the only 457 plan that makes this one kind of qualified like. So deferral, this is much like a 401k plan, 457 plans, 17,500. These are not aggregated. So the maximum that I can put in if I have a 401b and a 401k, the most I can put in, not age 50, I've been there for 15 years, the most that I can put in is 17,500 total if I have a 403b and 401k. So our step simple is I aggregate all those together. I can't put anything more. 457s, I can put an additional 17,500. So these are not aggregated together. There are two different catch-up provisions, and these are not additive, and we'll talk about what those are. In a bit, contributions are protected by trust. And then in public 457 plans. In private 457 plans, not protected by trust, so, and means that they have substantial risk of forfeiture because they're open to the creditors of the employer. And then of private 457 plans, can only have one catch-up provision. The ineligible 457s, traditional deferred compensation, there's no limit on putting the money in there, only highly compensated. Contributions are not protected by trust. There's no catch-up contributions and no rollovers. Well, you don't need catch-up if there's no annual limit on what you can put in there. You can't roll these over into a other qualified plan or to an IRA. You can do eligible 457 plans. Again, going back here, 457B plans are considered eligible. You can roll these over. Three-year catch-up rule. This is the catch-up for the last 3 years before normal retirement age in the plan document. So it's 50. If it's 65, you can do it 62, 63, 64, 60, assuming you retire on your 65th birthday. You can do that in the last 3 years. What the catch-up is, it's 17,000. So you get 17,500. You can basically double that up to 35,000. There is an age 50 catch-up. If you're 50 but not in the last 3 years, the catch-up is 5,500. 17,500 plus 5,500 equals $23,000, just like a 401k and 403b. So I can do that. So 49 is 17,500. 50 up to age 62, 50 through age 61 is $23,000. 62 up to 65, the last 3 years is $35,000. So here's a 457B comparison. Make note of these. We talked about all these things. Public 457, government 457, protected by trust. These assets, private 457B, these can be considered eligible, are not protected by trust, subject to substantial risk of forfeiture. Only these make this qualified like. This is for rank and file. These two over here can be for key management. I can be discriminatory. In both cases, the tax contributions are pre-tax. In these cases, and the cases here for private 457B and ineligible 457 plans, 457F plans, then and for ineligible 457 plans, you got to have the substantial risk of forfeiture, i.e., not in a trust. Funds grow tax deferred, age 50 catch up, only here in this qualified like plan, not over here. 3-year catch up here and here, but not here. This one has unlimited deferrals. Remember? So, whoops, sorry. Okay. Rollovers permitted into, basically this makes this qualified like, into IRAs, into other qualified like plans. Not permitted unless enrolled over into another 457. Ineligible is not permitted at all. So you can't roll into a 401k. 10% early withdrawal penalty. It applies in general, but not upon withdrawal at retirement or upon early termination of employment. In this case, it can apply. In this case, it can apply. So no 10% withdrawal penalty, but will be subject to taxation. And that's the end of this chapter.